The road feels different after midnight. Not because the streets change, but because your mind does. Every passing headlight looks brighter. Every police cruiser suddenly catches your attention. And if flashing red and blue lights appear behind you, even for a few seconds, your entire body reacts before your brain can catch up. Your grip tightens on the steering wheel. Your breathing changes. Your thoughts start racing. And that's exactly why so many drivers accidentally make the worst possible decisions during a DWI stop without even realizing it. Here's the scary part most people never think about. A lot of DWI cases are not built from one huge mistake. They're built from small moments, tiny reactions, careless words, nervous behavior, confusion, silence at the wrong time, talking too much at the wrong time. And by the time drivers understand what's really happening, the officer has already started mentally building a case, piece by piece. Have you ever looked back at a traffic stop and realized the officer seemed to control the entire conversation from the very beginning? Tell me in the comments, because one of the tricks we're talking about today catches even calm, intelligent drivers completely off guard. And trust me, the third tactic on this list is where many drivers accidentally hand officers the exact evidence they were looking for. One thing people misunderstand about DWI stops is the idea that police are only searching for obvious drunken behavior. That's not how many investigations actually work. Real DWI investigations are often slow, subtle, and psychological. An officer may already suspect impairment before they ever walk up to your window. Maybe they observed slight lane drifting. Maybe you braked late. Maybe you drove too cautiously. Maybe your registration light was out, and the stop simply opened the door for further observation. What matters is this. Once the stop begins, the officer is not only listening to what you say, they are studying how you say it. Your timing, your coordination, your facial reactions, your memory, your confidence. Even the way you search for your license can become part of the bigger picture. And that brings us to the first trick, the calm voice strategy. This one is incredibly effective because it doesn't feel aggressive at all. The officer approaches casually. Good evening. How are you tonight? Where are you headed? Coming from somewhere fun? Nothing sounds threatening. Nothing sounds like an interrogation. That's intentional, because relaxed conversation lowers defenses faster than confrontation. Most drivers think the stop becomes serious only after direct questions about alcohol. Wrong. The evaluation often begins immediately. An officer may already be paying attention to whether your answers are delayed, inconsistent, overly detailed, defensive, or strangely rehearsed. And nervous drivers often do something dangerous here. They start volunteering information nobody requested. I only had one beer. I'm actually totally sober. We left the bar a while ago. I wasn't even drinking that much. Notice something important. The officer may not have even mentioned alcohol yet. But once drivers panic internally, they start trying to explain things preemptively. That alone can shift the entire direction of the stop. Because now, the officer's suspicion has something concrete to focus on. A surprising number of people believe honesty automatically protects them during these encounters. Life is not that simple. An honest statement can still become evidence, especially if later details appear inconsistent. And inconsistencies do not always come from lying. Stress destroys memory precision. People forget exact times. They mix up locations. They estimate poorly. Now, imagine how that looks from an officer's perspective. You first say you had one drink. Later you mention stopping at 2 different places. Then you struggle remembering what time you left. The officer may begin viewing your confusion as deception instead of stress. That's why these conversations become more dangerous than people realize. Now, let's talk about the second trick. The silence tactic. This one makes drivers extremely uncomfortable. The officer takes your information, walks back to the patrol vehicle, and stays there. Minutes pass, sometimes a long time. And during those minutes, most drivers start mentally spiraling. What's happening? Why is this taking so long? Are they calling someone? Do they think I'm drunk? Meanwhile, officers often continue observing behavior from a distance. That's the part many people never think about. They assume observation stops once the officer walks away. Not necessarily. An officer may still be watching through mirrors, windows, or dash cameras. And nervous drivers behave differently when left alone. Some start digging through the vehicle frantically. Some make phone calls. Some argue with passengers. Some begin drinking water aggressively, hoping to look sober. Some even step out unexpectedly. That last one can escalate things very quickly. From an officer's point of view, sudden movement during a stop raises concern immediately, especially at night, especially on isolated roads, especially during suspected impairment investigations. Now here's what makes this tactic psychologically powerful. Silence creates anxiety. Anxiety creates mistakes, and mistakes create evidence. That's why experienced officers often remain patient, while nervous drivers slowly unravel on their own. Now, the third tactic is where many people accidentally destroy their own situation, the step out of the vehicle transition. This moment changes everything. Inside your car, you feel somewhat stable, protected, grounded. Once you step outside, the environment changes instantly. Flashing lights, passing traffic, darkness, wind, adrenaline. Suddenly your body feels different, and officers know this. That's why roadside evaluations are so psychologically difficult, even for sober people. Your legs may shake from stress alone. Your mouth may feel dry. Your balance may look awkward standing beside a highway while cars fly past at high speed. But here's the dangerous part. Officers are documenting observations during this entire transition. How smoothly did you exit? Did you use the door for balance? Did you forget instructions? Were your movements delayed? Did you appear confused? Most drivers think evidence begins with sobriety tests. No, the evidence collection process often begins far earlier than that. And once someone is outside the vehicle, officers gain a much broader opportunity to study coordination and behavior. Now, let me tell you something many people learn too late. Fear itself can imitate impairment. A completely sober person under extreme stress may look nervous, distracted, clumsy, and mentally scattered. Especially if they've never been stopped before, especially if they already fear police interactions, especially if they're imagining worst-case scenarios in real time. And unfortunately, nervousness does not stop an investigation. In some situations, it may intensify suspicion. That's why emotional control matters so much during these encounters. Not because calmness magically prevents arrest, but because panic feeds the officer more behavioral observations. Now comes trick number 4. The divided attention setup. This tactic is subtle, but incredibly effective. An officer begins layering instructions and questions simultaneously. Where are you coming from? Can you stand over here? Do you take medication? Face this direction. Have you had anything to drink tonight? Keep your hands out of your pockets. What's happening psychologically is important. Your brain is being overloaded. Human beings perform worse under pressure when forced to multitask. Memory weakens, coordination weakens, speech changes, reaction, speed changes. And under stress, people start making tiny mistakes, not because they're intoxicated, because human cognition collapses under pressure faster than most people realize. But to an observing officer, those mistakes may still appear significant. This is one reason many drivers later replay the stop in their head thinking, "Why couldn't I think clearly?" Because adrenaline changes everything, especially when authority, fear, and uncertainty combine together. Now we reach the 5th tactic, and this one quietly traps countless drivers every single year: the reassurance strategy. This happens when the officer suddenly sounds understanding, almost sympathetic. "Look, just be honest with me. I'm trying to help you out. If you cooperate, this can go easier." Most people respond emotionally to reassurance. It feels human, comforting, less threatening. And that emotional shift is exactly why the tactic works so well. Drivers stop filtering themselves carefully. Then come the damaging statements. "I didn't think I was that drunk. I only live 5 minutes away. I probably shouldn't have driven." Those admissions become powerful later, because once spoken, they cannot be taken back. And here's something uncomfortable but important. An officer does not need screaming, stumbling chaos to justify a DWI arrest. Small observations stacked together can create probable cause. Odor of alcohol, admitted drinking, nervous behavior, confused answers, delayed responses, poor coordination, lane drifting. Everything gets combined into one narrative. That narrative matters enormously later in court. And many drivers never realize how much of that narrative they personally helped create during the stop itself. Now, to be fair, Impaired driving is genuinely dangerous. People lose lives because of it every year. Families are destroyed because someone chose to drive while impaired. That reality matters. But understanding how investigations work also matters because ordinary drivers often walk into these encounters completely unprepared psychologically. They think being polite automatically protects them, or they believe honesty guarantees fairness, or they assume officers only care about obvious intoxication. Real investigations are more complicated than that, much more complicated. And there's another mistake people constantly make during DWI stops: over-explaining. This is one of the fastest ways nervous drivers accidentally create contradictions. They talk too much because silence feels uncomfortable. So, instead of giving short, controlled answers, they begin telling long stories: where they were, who they were with, what they drank, why they left, how long they stayed, what time they ate, and buried inside long explanations are often inconsistencies the officer can revisit later. That's why experienced attorneys constantly warn clients about uncontrolled talking during police encounters. Stress makes people ramble. Rambling creates details. Details create opportunities for contradiction. And contradiction creates suspicion. Now, here's something else most drivers never think about. The stop may already be recorded from multiple angles before the officer even reaches your window. Dash cameras, body cameras, microphones, vehicle systems. So, behavior before direct contact matters too. Did you stop quickly? Did you continue driving for a long distance? Were your movements frantic inside the car? Did you appear to hide something? Everything may later become part of the officer's report. And once reports are written, they often sound far more organized and convincing than the chaotic reality drivers actually experienced. That's why people are sometimes shocked when they finally read police reports later. The event they remember emotionally feels very different from the structured narrative described on paper. And by then, the consequences may already be serious. License suspension, insurance increases, court appearances, attorney fees, employment consequences, travel complications, professional reputation damage. Some people spend years dealing with fallout from a single stop that lasted less than 30 minutes. Think about that. Half an hour changing years of someone's life. That's why awareness matters. Not paranoia, not hostility. Awareness. Understanding how officers build observations. Understanding how stress affects behavior. Understanding how quickly casual conversation becomes evidence. And most importantly, understanding that many DWI investigations are psychological long before they become legal. Because once flashing lights appear behind you, the officer is not just looking at whether you broke a traffic law. They may already be quietly evaluating whether every word, movement, and reaction fits a much bigger story.